All right, so we're going to review some elementary skills, starting today with column multiplication. Column multiplication is also called place value multiplication. And it's a very important skill needed, or an understanding needed, to work in distribution, which is a kind of multiplication for polynomials and other type of numbers. So we're going to look at distribution and column multiplication in this video to kind of tie together pre-algebra and elementary math. So let's start with a simple example and sort of break down the two concepts. Suppose I have a number like 28, and I want to multiply that, and I'll use the times symbol, multiply that by 3. The first thing to recognize is that 28 is actually a number made up of 2 digits. So if I just had a 2, that would be a value of 2. But because I have an 8 following the 2, that pushes the 2 into the tens place. Remember learning about ones and tens places in elementary school, where the number 2 in the tens place means that this 2 actually represents the number 20. And so I could rewrite 28 as 20 plus 8. That'd be 2 times 10 for the tens place. 2 in the tens place will give me 20, because 2 times 10 is 20. And then 8 in the ones place would be 8 times 1, which is just 8. If I want to multiply this by 3, and I'm going to put it in parentheses so it makes sense what I'm doing here. So I have 28. I've rewritten it, but it's still worth 28 points. It's still a 28 value. If I want to multiply that by 3, that means I have to multiply all the parts. I have to multiply the 20 part of 28 by 3, and I have to multiply the 8 part of 28 by 3. So later, when you're working with other types of numbers, you'll do exactly this process. And that's what we'll start learning in pre-algebra. This is called distribution, which is just a fancy algebra term for multiplication. It has a different word from simple multiplication because it's used in other cases. It's a kind of a special multiplication process. So before we start understanding or working with distribution forms of multiplication later, we want to make sure that we're already good working with column multiplication. So just like here, where I have these arrows to help keep me organized as I do my multiplication through the 28, which has a tens place and a ones place, multiplied by 3, column multiplication is another way of organizing a number based on its value. So in column multiplication, I would put 28, write 28 down, but I would just know in my head that this is really a 20 and this is really an 8. And if I added those together, it equals 28. And that's recognizing that because of its position in the number, it has a value. And then if I want to multiply this by 3, I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did here. I'm going to multiply the 3 times the 8 first. In this case, 3 times 8. 3 times 8 is 24. So 3 times 8 is another kind of multiplication. This is called a math fact. And you learned these throughout your early elementary education in mathematics. You learned 3 times 8, 4 times 9, all of those little math facts, they're called, because they're single digit to single digit numbers that you have to really memorize and be able to come up with the value really quickly in your head. I did say it was single digit to single digit. Most of us learn math facts all the way up to 12 times 12. So you'll remember doing math tables where you needed to know 1 times 1 equals 1, 1 times 2 equals 2, on and on and on. And then you had another 2 times 3 equals 6, and 2 times 4 equals 8. And so you're learning your math fact by twos, or your twos math facts. You need to be really good at this already. If you're not, it's something you need to dedicate yourself to learning. If you didn't learn or memorize your math facts early in your education, the time is now. because it's just going to get harder and harder to continue in math without knowing those math facts. But once you've memorized all the way up to 12 times 12, or at least up to, not all schools taught you 12 times 12, at least up to 10 times 10, at least that far, if you've already memorized them, then column multiplication is super easy. If you haven't yet memorized your math facts, column multiplication is going to be harder. And as I said earlier, you need to get on that, get yourself some flashcards and memorize your math facts. Okay, so let's get back to the column multiplication. I'm going to multiply the 3 times 8. And when I multiply 3 times 8, I get, did I write it over here? I get 24 because I've memorized that. Now notice what I ended up with when I multiplied these two single digit numbers, 3 times 8. I ended up with a double digit number, meaning that I have a number that belongs in the ones column and I have another number that belongs in the tens column. So I have to break this number up when I do my column multiplication and put the numbers where they belong. So I'm going to write the 4 in the ones column because that's exactly where I'd like it to be, but the 2 belongs in the tens column. Now down here is where I'm going to write my answer. So I'm going to write the 2 up here and call it a remainder, or excuse me, a carryover. And I think that's probably the term most of you learned as you were coming up, that we carry the 2. So it's a carryover. It belongs in the tens column, so I'm going to put it in the tens column. Okay, now how do I deal with that? Well, I finished multiplying the 3 times the 8. Now I want to multiply the 3 times 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. But remember, I have this remainder here. So I have 3 times 2 is 6, meaning the number is 60, and I want to add to that the 20. So 3 times 2 would give me 6 in the tens column. 6 in the tens column means 60. And I still have a 2 that belongs in the tens column here. So I'm just going to add the remainder. So 3 times 2 is 6. Add 2 is 8. And when I write that down, I get the 60 plus 20 equals 80 in the tens column. So that's the breakdown or the foundation of how column multiplication works. You want to make sure that you keep things in their place value positions as you work. And it's sort of just a note-taking way of working. So let's do some examples. Let's grow into some bigger numbers than just two-digit number times a one-digit number. And I'll talk you through the process of keeping your record keeping. This organization, which up here was arrows, here is keeping really neat columns. So let's multiply this time. Well, why don't we go ahead and multiply 28 times 28. 28 worked for us the first time, so we might as well use it the second time. So this time, instead of multiplying a 3 times 8 and a 3 times 2, we have to multiply 28 times 28. Which can get a little confusing. If I wrote it in this other form, I would be saying 28, which is the same as 20 plus 8, and I would have to multiply that times 20 plus 8. If I used arrows to keep myself organized, I would say, well, first I want to multiply the 20 times the 20, then I have to multiply this 20 times the 8, but now I have an 8 that has to be multiplied into the 20 and an 8 that has to be multiplied to the 8. What I just did was distribution, right? So this is distribution. You'll be learning that this year. But in the meantime, we want to use columns instead of these little loops. It's just so much easier with numbers, with integers. It's so much easier to work with columns. So let's go ahead and do that, remembering that this 8, so this 8 has to be multiplied to both the 20 and to the 8. So I'm going to multiply it 8 times 8. That's the first multiplication. And we know that 8 times 8 is 64. So if 8 times 8, let me come over here and do some notation. If 8 times 8 equals 64, this is the number that goes in my ones place, and this is the number that goes in my tens place. That means I'm going to write the 4 here because this is my ones column, and then I'm going to put 6 up here as a remainder, or excuse me, as a carryover, so I can do what I did here where I can add it into whatever I get on my next step. So my next step then would be 8 times 2. So notice I first multiply the 8 times the 8, and then I multiply the 8 times 2. Well, 8 times 2 is 16, and then I have to add the 6. So 16 plus 6 is 22. I'm going to write the 2. And because I don't have anything else here, that any other column here that I might need to put a remainder or, excuse me, a carryover on, then I'm just going to write my 22 down. So when I get to the end, I go ahead and write my whole number because I don't have any reason to write the remainder. I could do it that way. I don't know why I keep saying remainder. I'm so sorry. That's a division term. I mean the carryover. I could carry it over here. I could write it up here and say, I'm going to write the 2 down, and then I'm going to carry over the other 2. And so 8 times 0, because there's nothing here, right? So 8 times 0 is 0, add the 2, I can write the 2 down. So I'm technically doing exactly the same thing when I get to the end, just it's easier just to go ahead and write the whole number down because I have it. All right, enough of that. So I have finished with the multiplication of the ones place. So this ones place I have multiplied into both the 8 in the ones place and the 20 in the tens place. So now I'm ready to multiply this 20s number, right? The number 20, this is a 2 in the tens place. So that means I'm going to work in the second column because this is where the tens belong. So I'm going to put a 0 here because there won't be any new ones to add in this case. If I'm multiplying, if one of my numbers is already in the tens place, it doesn't matter what I multiply it by. I have to be at least the tens place after that. So I'm going to put a 0 here, and then I'm going to start my multiplication again. I'm going to take this 2, which is really this 20, and I'm going to multiply it to each digit in the other number. So 2 times 8, we already know that is 16. And then I don't want to keep my same carryover. I want to start a whole new line of carryover for each row that I work down here. So I have the number 16. I'm going to write the 6, and then I'm going to carry over the 1 into here. I have to erase this. I didn't leave myself enough room to scratch it out. On your paper, you'll mostly scratch these out. All right, so I need a 1 next to this 2. Now I can take 2 times 2, which is 4, plus 1 is 5. Now, what I've done is I've multiplied 20 times 28, right? So this 20 times both parts of the 28, and the value I got for 20 times 28 was 560. Right? So when I did this multiplication, let me change the color. When I did this multiplication, I got 560. Now, if I look back to when I did the first multiplication, 8 times 28, that's this one, 8 times 28, and the value I got there was 220. And so I have to take these two parts and add them together to get my final answer. And so luckily I've already set my numbers up in rows. So all I have to do is add using column addition. 4 plus 0 equals 4. 2 plus 6 equals 8, and 2 plus 5 equals 7. And so if I add these two numbers together, I get 784. So 28 times 28 equals 784. So let's do another example, and this time let's do a 3-digit by a 3-digit. So how about 123, and we want to multiply that times, I don't know, 358. That works. Okay, so notice 3 digits times 3 digits. I'm not going to do a distribution or even really talk about that, but remember 123 is 100 plus 20 plus 3, and then 358 is 300 plus 50 plus 8, and we have to multiply each part of one number into each part of the other number. So let's just do it. 8 times 3 is 24. I'm going to write the 4, and I'm going to carry the 2. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 2 is 18. Write the 8 and carry the 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So I'm now done with this, which means I can put a 0 right here. And I actually do like to cross that digit out when I'm working so I don't get lost in my work. Let's move on. 5 times 3 is 15. Well, let's get rid of our carryovers. 5 times 3 is 15, so I'm going to write the 5 and carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. And 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. So I'm done with these carryovers, and I'm done with this multiplication. Last row is, well, once I have x's, remember, just bring x's down as zeros when you get down. So this x just pushes through to make a 0. This x just pushes through to make a 0. And so now I'm going to multiply 3 into all the other parts of the other number. So 3 times 3 is 9. No carryover. That's good. 3 times 2 is 6. Again, no carryover. And then 3 times 1 is 3. And so now I have 3 parts from this whole multiplication. First, I multiplied the 8 into the 123, and I got this value. Then I multiplied the 5 into 123, and I got this value. And then I multiplied the 3 into 123, and I got this value. When I add them all together, I'll end up with the final answer. 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 5 is 13. Yes, I had to check on my fingers. I must have been sick the week we were learning about 8s when I was in elementary school. And even today, I struggle a little bit with my memorized math facts and my addition subtraction on 8s. I don't know why, but I've just developed a way to work with it. So whenever I'm dealing with an 8, I just double check. All right, let's move on. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 9 is 19. Now, notice what happened. I got 19. Oh, wait. I think I've made a mistake here. I stopped to tell the story about how I was sick when I learned 8s. Let's go back. I'm going to start over. 4 plus 0 is 4. 8 plus 5, I already determined, is 13. But 13, remember, has 2 digits in it. So I'm going to write the 3, and I'm going to carry over the 1. So I'm going to write the 3, and then I'm going to put the 1 up here in the next column for carryover. Now let's add those together. 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 1 is 11, plus 1 more is 20. Again, 20 is 2 digits. I'm going to write the 0 and carry over the 2. So I'm going to write the 0, and then I'm going to put the 2 in the next column. I'm doing only addition, so 2 plus 6 is 8. Oh, Lord, I have an 8. So 8 plus 6 should be 14. Give me a second to check. Perfect, 14. So I'm going to write the 4. I like this little visual, so I'm going to go ahead and do it again. If I get the number 14, remember I'm going to write this one down, and I'm going to carry this one up. So I have a 4. I'm going to put a 1 in the last column. 3 plus 1 is 4. So if I multiply 123 times 358, I get the result 44,034. Pretty easy, huh? Let's do one more example, I think. Let's do a 3-digit by a 2-digit. So let's do 369 times 43. That sounds good. Okay, this time I'm going to start with my 3. 3 times 9 is 27. I get the number 27. I'm going to write the 7. I'm going to carry the 2. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 2, 19, 20. I'm going to write the 0. I'm going to carry the 2. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. So I'm just going to write that down. And now I don't want my carryovers anymore for that row. I'm done with 3, which pushes down to make a 0 right there. Now, 4 times 9 is 36. I'm going to write the 6. I'm going to carry over the 3. And the 3 goes, let's see, I multiplied 4 times 9 to get the 36. So the 3 has to go into this column over the 6. 4 times 6 is 24, plus 3 is 27. I'm going to write this one. I'm going to carry the 2. So 7, and then carry the 2 over here. So last but not least, 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14. 7 and 0, adding. 7 and 0, 4 and 1, and 1 and 1. So 369 times 43 equals 2,577.